Broadcasting from the heart of downtown Hollywood. This is SoFlowRadio.com.
Stuart Reed, attorney, mediator, and yoga instructor. Here for the next hour to talk about law, mediation, and yoga. So let's drop into our breath and come to order. The show is now in session.
I hear the mics are hot, and so are we. So I'll start giving our introductions. Everybody knows George Rodriguez. I'm
about
certain
to sneeze
of that.
and just, wow, great
Everywhere
time.
I go. Go ahead, sneeze. Bless you.
No,
Yes.
I don't want to. There, I beat it. I defeated that sneeze.
Okay. Yeah, I always knew you were a strong-willed person, George. And I'm Stuart Reed. This is my show. I'm a lawyer, a mediator, and a yoga instructor. And we have here Stephanie King, who my friend Leah Segi, a psychologist who was on the show a few months ago, or psychotherapist.
Psychotherapist, right.
And she suggested, hey, Stephanie would be great for your show. She teaches nonviolent communications, which I had heard of before. I went on a cruise called the Zen Cruise, and they had lots of different workshops. Not all of them were about yoga and meditation. Some of them were just about mindfulness. And there was somebody who taught nonviolent communications. A friend of mine said, you really got to go to this one. And I went to another class, and I met the gentleman who spoke about it. And it seemed as though it was a very broad developed system, that nonviolent communications isn't just about teaching people how to be more courteous in their communications, but I understand, and also from looking online, Stephanie, about it, that it's really a way for people to communicate in organizations, families, just that there are certain skills that you teach people so that they can express themselves and understand themselves better, and also to hear other people better, and to actually for people to feel more satisfaction in their communications. And okay, so I'll let you pick it up from there. Tell me more about it, please, and about yourself.
Oh, okay.
And what's your background in nonviolent communications?
Right. So nonviolent communication actually was a system developed by Marshall Rosenberg way back in the 60s, when nonviolence was something that we were exploring on multiple levels, and in politics as well as in communication. And when people hear it, it's sometimes called the language of compassion or the language of connection. And it's interesting that they sometimes think that makes you nicer. Not necessarily. What it makes you, as you learn the system, and it's a practice, a system to learn, it enables you to be both compassionate and authentic. It enables you 80% of the time to communicate effectively with yourself. And if most of us could tune really loudly what we say to ourselves when we make a mistake, when we do something we wish we hadn't done, when we find ourselves in a situation that we're not enjoying, we would never let anybody else talk to us the way
So you have to examine your thoughts, is what you're saying.
Well,
you just don't let it go and think that everything I say to myself is the gospel. You examine your thoughts, that some thoughts are not necessarily true. It could be something that your parents said to you at a young age that you're still saying to yourself, oh, I don't sing good. And so you never sung, and you never developed and found that you have a good singing voice.
Exactly. And actually, I love that you say that, because mindfulness and nonviolent communication go hand in hand with each other. So it's an invitation to bring up to consciousness what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're needing and wanting, and to find a way to identify that and ask for what would make life more wonderful for myself or for somebody else without demanding.
So if I could just jump
Sure.
in so the first step in mindful communications, it sounds to me, is think before you speak. the old adage.
I would say the first step, even before you think, is notice that you're thinking and observe before you speak. And begin to learn the difference between what happened that I actually observed, like you spoke to me in a louder voice than I enjoyed, as opposed to what I thought, which you yelled at me and you're mean. Right? And so the first part of that is making that distinction, beginning to learn to be present with what is and to just be able to observe it and describe it.
So the observations, it sounded to me like what we tell people in yoga too, like to scan your body. And if you're holding tension in your body, and that I will remind people, if during the day you feel all tense and stressed out, do you feel that physically in your body too, where you're clenching your jaws or you're clenching your fist or your shoulders hunched up, so that if you relax your body, that maybe mentally you feel less stress and anxious as well. So you're tuning into physical cues?
Absolutely, very connected. And we use it a little differently, which is the sooner I tune into physical cues are the start of telling me what I'm feeling, because feelings are embodied in the body. They're sensations. And the more I understand what I'm feeling, the purpose of feelings is to help me identify my needs and know what I want. I have one of the practitioners that I work with, I love, she talks to her kids and she says, when, mommy sometimes feels angry, and she knows that when she feels her anger in her feet, that it's time to deal with it. Because if it gets past my ankles and up to my knees, I'm gone. Then it's World War III at home. So let's tend to those sensations or those feelings as soon as we notice them, and do what we can to care for ourselves and others.
So let's say you're coming to me and George, and we called you up, and I just went through the yellow pages because I was looking for somebody to train us in nonviolent communications.
Okay.
We really are tired of punching each other in the face or whatever we do, saying nasty things to each other. So if you were coming here to tell us, okay, this is what it's going to look like if you and George are engaging in nonviolent communications, what would it look like? How would we be communicating with each other differently?
Sure. So I love the question, and it's kind of fun because very often, actually, people come to me for nonviolent communication. What they really want is help telling somebody else something that's kind of unpleasant, and they know the other person's going to be upset. So to come and say that's a great start, to just say we would like to communicate with each other more effectively and with more compassion and kindness. And so then I would say, actually, nonviolent communication is kind of like bowling. The rules are very simple. What's difficult is the practice, but the rules are simple. That we start with the premise that most of our behavior is in the service of meeting a need.
Okay, say that again, because I think that's important.
Most of our behavior, what we do as humans, is simply in the service of meeting a need.
Personal needs, or it could be anybody's needs.
If I get to the supermarket and I push somebody out of the way and I hurry rudely into first in line, why am I doing that? Well, usually because I have some need. I might be late for work. I might be feeling ill and whatever.
Even if I just go to the beach and lie out in the sun, I'm meeting the need for relaxation and fresh air.
Exactly. So we begin to, when we understand...
You would tune into needs.
We tune into needs. To needs, my needs and the other person's needs. So if somebody's on your back all the time at work about a job, you get to ask yourself, what does that person need? Maybe they need a little more trust in me. Maybe they need a little more efficiency. Maybe they need a little help with the stress of their workload.
But I'm thinking, when you mention that, is that a lot of times conflict arises because somebody, like you're saying, you tune into what are their needs that they're expressing, but I'm thinking they're telling me what their wants are, and their wants are unreasonable, unfair.
Yes.
That what they want and need are different. They want more from me than is really fair to ask.
So what we learn in nonviolent communication is to separate out needs from strategies. Okay? Needs are like, I want I have a need for competence and for excellence. And so I want certain things to happen on this radio program. And so I'm coming to you and I'm saying, I need you to do this and this and this and this. But if I go back to first understanding what you're wanting, what you're needing excellence, you're needing competence, you're needing certain things. And so now I can open up the box of strategies to discover whether the specific strategy you picked is the most effective one, or whether we could invent strategies we haven't even thought about yet to meet those needs. Because in that example that you chose, there are two people. They're the needs of your partner and the people you work with, and they're your own needs. And we hold them equally. It's not like, you learn nonviolent communication. That doesn't mean you give in or give up. The goal is a win-win, that we speak for all the human needs.
And what's the purpose? It seems to me that maybe the purpose is not putting off the other person, that you're speaking in a nonviolent way so they can receive your message without feeling like you're trying to put your hands around their neck and like, you listen to me and you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
But I think it takes patience too, because what if I guess it takes training that both people need to know what the rules of nonviolent communication are. If I'm practicing or a practitioner of nonviolent communication, but the other person has never heard about it before, then they might still be not open to hearing what I'm saying, drowning. Like a lot of times you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, but you can't finish a sentence. How can you have a conversation with somebody if you can't even convey a thought?
So first, really only one person needs to know nonviolent communication.
Okay.
For things to change.
Then
so
go ahead.
Right away. And so if I'm trying to finish a thought and you keep interrupting me or you keep talking and I haven't finished my thought, I pause. And first I give myself empathy quietly in my head. I go, oh, wow, this is a really tough situation, talking here to Stuart. Every time I open my mouth, I get 2 words out and he's in. And what's going on in me? Oh, I'm feeling really angry and annoyed and frustrated that I can't express my idea. So what do I need or want to do to take care of my need? Do I want to continue this conversation? Do I want to say, hey, Stuart, it sounds like you have lots of other things on your plate. I'll talk to you later. So first I go first to myself, sort of the airplane theory of oxygen on you before anybody else. And then once I'm comfortable and I decide I want to continue to talk with you, I might notice first what's going on with you that leads you to jump in and finish my sentences. And I might make a guess. And it's like, I'm guessing, Stuart, I'm using way more words than you're enjoying. Mm-hmm. Am I right?
Well, yeah, I was going to give you an example too, but I was thinking of something also. Should we have her turn a little bit so that she's
fine.
sort of in the camera?
There you go, just like that.
Okay,
good. I was just wondering that we can't see.
You got the back of my head.
Their nice smile.
She looked very comfy there. I wasn't going to say
she
anything.
was, and I put it.
Okay, there we go. Voice and face.
Because that's something that happens to me, and I don't know that it's happened until it's already done, and then the all that's left is the dust and the smoke.
Right.
Where I'm trying to communicate with somebody and they cut me off. I'm like, wait a minute, try to hear what I'm saying. They cut me off again, and then so maybe my volume goes a little louder. Like, well, if I talk louder, maybe you won't cut me off, or maybe you'll hear me this time. And then if they still cutting me off, and then eventually they're like, hey, why are you raising your voice to me? I'm going to hang up. It always happens on the phone too.
Right.
I'm going to hang up
Why are
the
you
phone.
shouting at me?
And I hate it.
Yeah. So remember, the first step is observation. So I go back and notice I'm not enjoying this conversation. Okay. And then I take a moment to check in. Why am I not enjoying this conversation? And then maybe I check with you. Is this a good time to talk? Are you interested in what I'm having to say? Do you have the time and energy to attend to the information I'm giving you? Because maybe I'm giving you or wanting to have a conversation with you you're not wanting to have. And we talk about nonviolent communication. We look at the force that is underlying that example you gave me. You're going to listen to me when I want to talk to you. And if you don't, I'll raise my voice. And if that doesn't work, I'll get mad at you. And therefore, I am basically demanding
attention.
Yes. As opposed to nonviolent communication, I would come in and, I walk in and I've just had this great time on the radio show and I want to tell my husband all about it. And I come in and I go, "Hey, sweetheart, I had a great time at the radio station. Are you up for hearing about it now?" He's like, "No, don't tell me now." Right? I'm doing. So I go, "Okay."
So you guys are respectful with each
Yeah.
other, but usually I feel like it's happening when I'm not being respected. Like somebody's wants something from me,
Yeah.
and they're saying, "I want this from you," and I'm like, "Wait a minute, let me tell you about how." No, this is what I want. Like, well, listen. And then eventually it escalates, and then, hey, you're not hearing me. You're just yelling at me, Stuart, and so I'm not talking to you again.
Got it.
And then it's always the killer is the volume.
The volume goes up.
More-
And so that's always a key for me because I do the same thing. And so when I notice my voice goes up, I will often say to a person, "Wow, I'm noticing that I'm shouting. I want to stop, take a breath for a minute, and kind of check in and see what's going on for me." Because very often we do something else, is we project out. So somebody's doing something to me, like they're not respecting me. But usually that means I've abandoned myself. I haven't spoken up very early in saying, "I'm not sure that this conversation is I'm being heard the way I'd like to be heard. So let me check and see if the conditions are such that I'm likely to have my need met to be heard in a particular way. And if it's not, well, then I'm going to the beach."
It sounds like learning to talk like an adult rather than talking like a kid.
Yeah. We're trying. Actually, it's a very revolutionary system of communication because none of us were trained this way. Our culture trained us to think of good and bad, right and wrong, should and shouldn't. And so what we do is we turn each other into enemies when we don't get our way. And this is a way to connect and to recognize that we're all trying to do the same thing. We each want empathy first. We each want to be heard first. We each want our needs to be attended to. And so the question is, can we develop some skills that allow us to hold them both in presence and find a way to connect if connecting is wise? I mean, there are times that I might want to connect and you're like, "Stephanie, my plate is way too full. Could you just go away?" Now, if you said that to me in the old style, I might get my feelings hurt. I might make some judgments, but I could hear it. We learn to listen differently. I could hear it as, "Wow, Stuart's just overwhelmed." And so I'm just checking, "Stuart, do you want me to go away for the next millennium? Or can I come back, in a week or when you finish your project? What's good for you?" And if connecting with me is not good for you, then why don't I go where I'm likely to have my needs for a connection met joyfully and willingly, as opposed to under coercion?
So what kind of clients have you had for training nonviolent communication? Because I'm sitting here thinking, wow, what would it look like if lawyers were trained in nonviolent
Yes,
communications? But I'm guessing, couples, organizations. You able to give some examples?
Sure.
And then maybe we'll go back to lawyers and how we can benefit.
Sure. So first you mentioned Leah Sagi. And so I often get referrals from people who are working or therapists or psychotherapists or couples therapists who are wanting to help people find a safe place to practice nonviolent communication. And as in anything that we're learning for the first time, we're not skillful. And we don't often give each other a chance to do over and to practice with each other. And so I run a practice group where people who are interested in improving the way they connect with themselves, with their family members, the mom who says, "My son never calls me, and every time he does, I say, 'You never call me,' and then he doesn't call me for longer." How can we role play? What are the things we can talk about? So it's that general population. Then I do work with couples. I do work with individuals. I'm thinking of one who had a death in the family and knew that she would need to be in the presence of her family, siblings, and she was concerned about how she might interact. So we get to to look at what the concerns are, practice what you might want to say, consider what might come up and how you might deal with it. I work with parents that are tired of fighting with their kids over doing their homework, would like to find a more collaborative and compassionate way to solve those kinds of difficulties. And I work with organizations where it's not uncommon in nonprofits where people are doing work that they feel deeply connected to, that they sometimes overreach, they're tired, and they do well with their clients, and they're really hard on each other. And sometimes an organization will invite me to come and help them to connect with each other in a way that is more kind and compassionate and skillful.
So it's a system.
Yes.
Is there like a formula
Yes.
that you follow, like certain steps? I
Yes.
understood that the first step is recognize that you're actually thinking.
Right. So the
And
first
then
is
how you're feeling.
observation, learning about observation. The second is learning to identify your feelings. And for most adults, it's amazing. We have usually a vocabulary. I feel good. I feel bad. I have a sheet of vocabulary words of all the range of feelings that you might have. And as we learn to identify feelings, we also learn to notice that we often mix feelings with thoughts and judgments. And I might say, I feel that you're really rude. But that's not a feeling. That's a thought.
And a judgment.
And a judgment, right? Or I might say, I feel disrespected. But that's not a feeling, right?
Well, it feels bad when somebody's disrespecting you.
So I might say, I feel sad because I'm judging that you don't have much respect for me. Notice the difference, right? And the person might say, oh, I really...
deny.
Well, they might say, I really respect you. I just have no time for you right now. Or or they might say, yeah, I don't really have much respect for this thing. And I go, oh, okay. Now I know something important, right? So we observe, we identify our feelings, and we separate those feelings from our judgments and our thoughts. And then we use our feelings to connect with what we're needing at a particular time. And to look at the layers of needs that we have. Once we do that, then we learn to formulate requests, not demands. Notice the difference between a demand and a request. And think about who would be most excited to help meet a request that I have. With the Marshall's example that I love, Marshall Rosenberg, is we're looking for people who would assist us with the same pleasure that a little kid feeds a duck.
Okay, say that.
We're looking for people. When I go and ask somebody, like, I've discovered that I really have a need for companionship.
So you want them to run up to you like little ducklings for bread?
Well, or the kid who's feeding the little ducklings. I want somebody who's like, oh, wow, can I do that? Right? And if that pleasure is not there, if it's an obligation or a requirement or a coercion, then I'm going to go, no, that's the wrong, I'm going to the wrong place. I'm going to the wrong place.
So, okay, so what about on the other side? What if they have not learned nonviolent communication skills, so you are practicing nonviolent communication skills, but how does that change the other person's receiving of your communications?
Yeah, so it's kind of like this. My husband doesn't practice nonviolent communication, and we've been married for 42, 43 years. Okay? So it goes something like this. There's something I want, right? Let's say. And I want to talk to him. And I know that what I have to say, he might not enjoy hearing. Okay? So I come in and I go, hey, I'd like 5 minutes of time to tell you something, but I'm guessing it might be something that you might not initially enjoy hearing. Are you willing to hear it?
So it's a matter of timing, too. I mean, I do
Yeah.
that all the time. You have time to talk to me.
Right.
That's, I figure, if it's important, if I have an important topic to discuss with somebody, we need some time, and you can't just jump in and demand somebody's time when they might be engaged in something else.
And so the other person doesn't have to have any skills. And he might go, oh, God, this again. Do we have to talk? Right? So I hear that, and I listen for his feelings and needs. And I go, you're probably worried I'm going to blame you for something. And I go, if I promise no blame, no shame, would you be up for this conversation if it doesn't last more than 10 minutes? Because you're also worried that I'm going to go on for the next 3 hours. So as I'm communicating my feelings and needs, I'm also, it's like instant translation for what is the other person telling me about their feelings and needs, even if their words are not in that example. Okay?
Is this something that they like teach for diplomacy, like State Department?
Oh, essential. And in diplomacy, we already know that the cultural rules are different. And so when transactions or communications go awry, meaning that there's a lot more emotional heat than a simple request would seem to warrant, then we know to stop and pause and observe and see if we can understand what we're actually talking about, as opposed to what the words that we chose are saying.
And my father was a lawyer, and one of the first lessons he taught me when I was a new lawyer is his saying was less is more.
Yes.
It's better to say too little than too much sometimes. Is that sort of one of the things you strive for in nonviolent communications, is to avoid saying things that are like landmines, that people don't feel like you're lobbing grenades at them?
Exactly. Yes, somebody once told me that his habit was throwing verbal hand grenades into conversations. And sometimes we like to do that for the excitement, and it gets everybody all riled up. But if we're not wanting entertainment, but we're wanting connection and compassion and understanding, then we try something slower. We remember to stop and breathe. We use a lot of the mindfulness tools so that I can bring my presence here. Because another thing we begin to learn when we start to use this practice is most of the time you're not talking to me, even though it looks like you are. You're talking to yourself, to your mother, to what your first grade teacher said. You're not really fully present to the person and the time here now. And so we learn to notice that. And sometimes to excuse ourselves, to take care of whatever is coming up that's past, or we use the word triggering us, and then step back into the conversation so that I can actually be talking to you.
So it's like a deliberate, slower paced conversation where you actually need time to process things.
Right.
And like, hey, give me a moment.
Yeah. And what happens is the longer you practice, it's kind of like driving. Can you remember back to the first time you drove? You know, your hands are tight on the wheel. You can't do anything else but drive. And now
staring at the line on the road. I don't want to cross that line. And just gripping.
You know, what do I do now? What do I do now? And then the more you drive, soon it becomes a new habit. And then you don't think about it. In fact, we think we can text and put on makeup and do all kinds of other things while we're driving.
I've eaten many burritos while driving.
Yes, right.
Bean burritos.
Oh, okay.
Not before the show, I hope.
No, it's a morning show.
Okay, good.
So the point of this is that it describes easily, and it lives hard, and it's not unlike mindfulness in that if I were to tell you what do you do for mindfulness, you sit down and you shut up and you're quiet and you watch your thoughts. What's so hard about that? Until you sit down, shut up, and watch your thoughts and get dragged a million places. So nonviolent communication is a practice, and it's a skill. And the more we practice it, the better we get at it. The faster I can translate nonviolent communication in the moment. I can give you an example. I don't know if we're allowed to use 4-letter words, but I'll...
George?
Yeah, it's your show.
Okay.
Yes, we absolutely
So
are. This is a First Amendment zone.
Our rating.
Okay.
So, no, there's no ratings over here. It's your own personal choice.
So I was a teacher for 43 years, a great deal of that time in the inner city. I had a favorite student, as I often had many favorite students, and he came in late one morning, and I said to him, "You're late." And he said, "F you. I will clean it up a little bit." Okay. So what do I hear?
Disrespect. Violence.
I could hear all kinds of things. What I hear is, he's in trouble.
Well, yeah, if he was your favorite, he obviously was a good kid. He was acting out of character.
Something's wrong here. Something's wrong here, right? And so I go, bad morning, huh? Right? Yeah. And that's all we need to say. Until afterwards, not in front of the whole class, not to disrupt a lesson or anything. Afterwards, I get to hear what's going on. Well, last night was the last day of his baseball season. His family was separated. His dad had been promising every single game he would come to watch his game. And this was the last game, and once again, his dad didn't come. He was done with grown-ups, especially grown-ups he liked. He just wasn't having any of them anymore. So my morning greeting, right? Now I would have missed all that if I had heard disrespect. And but I had to go be still my heart because I'm in front of a class of 35 kids.
Right.
And so I have
You got to maintain discipline and order in a classroom.
And order and all of that. So I have to very quickly do a lot of things to give myself empathy, still my panic, then I'm not going to lose the respect or the control of the class. So there's a lot of stuff that happens. And the more you practice, the faster you can do it. But I still have times that, my husband just needs, or my son just needs to tell me something in a particular time, in a particular tone of voice. And I'm like, okay, train is down the track. It's already 60 miles an hour. And I haven't even noticed that I've left the station.
Yeah, because we have triggers.
Right, right.
Maybe old energies from our parents.
Right.
The kind of respect they demanded. Now we're demanding it too. And not everybody's necessarily that way. It could be our own particular sensitivities.
And that's why practice group is so wonderful, because what we begin to do is we just practice, and I have lots of different exercises and games and strategies, but it's all in the service of learning these 4 steps: observation, feelings, needs, and requests.
Our own and the others as well?
That's right. That's right. In a bed of empathy and compassion for the desire to connect. Now, if I don't want to connect, then there's no need to talk nonviolent communication.
Why should people want to connect?
Well,
I mean, like they say, no man is an island.
Right.
But then again, let's just go back to that. No one's an island, but some of us think that we are.
Well, sometimes we need to be, and sometimes I won't choose nonviolent communication. Or I might choose no communication. I might, as in certain traditions, you go on a silent retreat, or you decide, no, this is not something I really want to talk about, or I don't really want to interact about. It's perfectly fine. Nonviolent communication is not a demand, but if you're wanting free choice, if you're wanting authenticity and intimacy and connection in a space of compassion and understanding, then this is a great tool. It's just another language. It's like in the old days, if you wanted to study science, you needed to study German because it was the language of the scientists. And I understand French is the language of the romantics, or so on.
Mm-hmm. That's what the French would have you think.
Yes, they would. Oui.
No personal experience.
Yeah, no.
And so this is just another language. It doesn't mean that the other languages we speak we need to throw away or not use or not have in our repertoire. But this is just one more tool that you have available.
Are there any very well-known people or organizations that have committed to nonviolent communications that you're aware of?
Oh,
it's
yes.
been around a long time.
It has. Yes, Marshall started in the 60s. He founded an organization called the Center for Nonviolent Communication. You can find it online, CNVC. And they do. They have trainers. Actually, it's internationally, and they have resources and do amazing work. There's also the New York Center for Nonviolent Communication under Tom Bond, who almost all of us.
I think he was the one who came and taught on the Zen cruise.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
that could well be.
Him.
Yes.
I met him a few times.
He's a
super guy.
Yeah, he's a skilled practitioner. Many of us trace our lineage to be trained by Marshall, so he too was trained by Marshall, and has an organization that also you can find online, and does things in the New York City area and then various other places internationally. There's the NVC Academy that's centered out in California, I think in San Francisco, and they have some wonderful trainers. And the great thing increasingly with just like what we're doing now is you can go online. There are YouTube videos, there are lots of materials, there are a lot of online courses for people if you can't work with somebody in person that will give you an introduction to these skills and allow you to just step on the road. And then it's just great. You can learn enough words, just like in another language, to ask where the bathroom is and to avoid a fight, or you can get really fluent.
Really? There's a way to ask to go to the bathroom and nonviolent communication ease?
There must be, but I'll have to think about it for a second.
Yeah, I know how to say it violently, so yeah, I'll wait.
Yeah.
For you
Get out of my way.
Yeah, I gotta be out of my way.
Yes.
Coming through.
Yes. Yeah.
Are there any things that sometimes have seemed counterintuitive to people, like when you teach nonviolent communication skills, where they may be like, "Are you kidding? That's how am I going to be heard? How am I? This sounds too complicated. Like somebody else is trying to put words in my mouth."
Oh, all of that. First of all, in the beginning when you're learning it, we call it like running tires. It's just there are these exercises, and people just hate it because they're things you need to learn, and it feels stilted at first, and it feels more than counterintuitive. It feels too self-revealing and vulnerable. So just a simple example, if I'm sitting in the studio and I say, "Is it hot in here?" which is the normal way we would.
We were having that conversation before you came this morning.
Are you warm?
Okay.
I asked Stuart, "Are you warm? Is it warm in here?"
So is it warm in here? Which allows me not to say, I'm feeling a little warm right now. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to turn down the air conditioner.
Well, I could be having a hot flash. I'm taking that into account, so I don't want to just presume that it's warm.
So, but so again, notice that even if that's the case, I withhold holding my experience first.
Right.
I could say, "Wow, I'm having a hot flash, and I'm wondering if other people are too, or whether it's just just my unique experience." But so the first practice that makes this odd for people is it does invite you to be vulnerable, to be transparent, to be seen. And people, most of us, if you actually look at a great deal of our communication, it's about hiding. It's about not revealing.
It's about manipulating.
Yes.
Getting what you want without really
Revealing.
making it look like you're trying to get what you want.
Right. So that's the first thing that people struggle with. The second thing is this idea of the difference between needs and strategies, and getting your needs met by asking, not demanding. So, for example, if you're married and you have a need for physical sex and interaction.
I was going to say intimacy.
Intimacy? Well, no, let's just talk about sex at this moment. You're feeling randy and you'd like to jump in bed, right? And your partner doesn't feel
Who's
like
Randy?
Oh.
What's Randy doing in my bed?
I don't know.
Randy's the spare.
Yeah.
So many people feel like, well, if my partner doesn't feel like it, no options, I'm stuck. And when we suggest, well, not really. There are lots of options, actually. Okay? And we separate out this notion of what we need from who we think ought to supply it. Mm-hmm. And we recognize that maybe our favorite go-to person won't be the best go-to person at any given time. And when that happens, often we starve ourselves, right? As opposed to going, how else can I get this need met? In line with my own values, in line with my own commitments. But is there another way I can do this? I'll give you a simpler and safe one. A grandmother who's feeling really frustrated because their grandchildren are either far away or their children don't bring the grandchildren often enough, all right? and they're annoyed and angry, and it's polluting the relationship.
Yeah, who wants to go visit the negative, angry grandma?
Right.
Every time we show up, oh, finally you showed up.
Finally you showed up. So as grandma, I get to sit and go, hey, what's bothering me? Well, I want to see my grandchildren. Let's dig deeper. Why? What are you needing? Oh, I want a kid in my lap to snuggle me and think I'm wonderful. Okay, well, your specific grandchild isn't available. Where could you fill up on grandma energy? Right? Are there hospitals where there are little kids that are dying for hugs? Is there your neighbor? I mean, my neighbors were so kind. Just as I was missing my grandkids, they were kind enough to have a baby. And little Tamari runs over every afternoon.
It's very conscientious.
Yes, right. And goes, Stephanie! And his hugs used to be at my knees, and now they're a little bit taller, and so on. And so by the time I've filled up my need for grandma love with little kids, and then my grandchildren arrive, I'm not starving. I'm happy to see them. I'm delighted for as much time as they have to give me. But I don't need to.
And probably better for your grandkids, too. Yes. You've been warmed up.
Right. Exactly. So it's that kind of, and people find that really hard, to separate the specific person from the need. Tom Bond, whom I mentioned before, is fond of saying, families are the best place to learn what you need and the worst place to get your needs met. And you can probably think of lots of holiday dinners or other gatherings where we sometimes go looking to get our needs for love or appreciation or something else met. And we know that we have them because we get increasingly irritated and we don't get them met there.
Like you're a servant without any appreciation.
Yeah. So you fill up before.
I was married, by the way.
Oh, so. Okay. So you must have lots of experiences of those challenges. And when our marriages end, it's because of that. Because I call it the vending machine theory of human relations, which is I come over to a person who's my vending machine of choice. I very nicely put in the coin of the realm, and then I press what I'm wanting, affection, solitude, whatever it is. And if I don't get it, then maybe I press again. Maybe I shake the machine.
Yeah, you're the one to make me feel like I'm a good person, like I'm meaningful, like I'm appreciated.
Right.
And where is that?
And and that's your job. And then we know that we step into nonviolent communication when we shout, when we kick the machine, when we do all kinds of things that are all in the service of making you meet my need, as opposed to going, oh, how else could I do that in a really healthy, happy, supportive way that's in line with the agreements that we have as a couple. Right? I set you free from my
sort
internal dungeon.
A bartering, like, hey, I know what you need. I know what you want. If you'll give me what I need and want, hey, we've got something going now.
Exactly. A simple example, my husband and I used to argue an inordinate amount of time for somebody who practices nonviolent communication over the fact that when I came home from work, I liked to have some affection and some connect time. And usually when I got home, it was right at news time. And he's a newsaholic, and that's the time to not have conversation, And so we went back and forth about that till we finally dawned on us. Our kids are gone. We have a place in the living room that has a piano that nobody has played for eons. Let's sell the piano, get a big enough TV that we can watch comfortably from our couch. And I promise not to talk if he promises to give me a lap and pat my head on occasion during the news. Lo and behold, we figured out a way to meet both our needs in a way that's kind and respectful. It took us a while.
And if you're watching the news, it probably gives you some thoughts as a trainer of nonviolent communication, because on the news, it seems like most of it isn't news. It's just people shouting over each other.
Increasingly. And actually, this era has been a gift to us in that we begin to notice what happens when we choose this style of communication. You asked me earlier, how does it help? Well, just imagine if Congress was willing to communicate in nonviolent ways. Mm-hmm. They might actually get some work done. And
like, I think that a lot of the problems in culture widely, I noticed starting like maybe around the Clinton time when they had Crossfire on TV, and that was the first news program where supposedly it was a news discussion.
Right.
But it was people just being really disrespectful to each other, shouting at each other, not letting some, and how these are adults, but now that's the norm. That's everywhere.
So one of the things we do in nonviolent communication is we ask ourselves to do this. Stop, breathe, and ask yourself, why do you want to speak?
To be heard.
Yes. So if you want to be heard, then you get to ask yourself, is this a person that is likely to want to hear what you have to say at this moment? If the answer to your best knowledge is no, then why would you speak? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So very often the answer, if we're truthful, is I don't want to be heard. I want to force you to take my point of view. Oh, that's a different reason for speaking.
Thought that just occurred to me. So you know that this show is yoga for what is the show called? Oh, law mediation. But I have a seminar called yoga, mindfulness and yoga for lawyers.
Right.
Is there a nonviolent communication for lawyers, like a way that that you're aware of for lawyers to speak more effectively to a judge, to a jury, to their clients? So there are things that you think would make somebody more, because we're in the business of advocacy, of
right.
being persuasive.
Right.
Does this help you become a more persuasive person, that people can be more receptive to your communications?
So it helps you to notice and to help people be more receptive. It's not an advocacy language, but from your own work, there are places for mediation, there are places for conflict resolution. And in those areas, you might not want to be... so
you're a mediator, too. So
yes,
you're saying this helps you as a mediator.
It's essential to mediation, because somebody will come in with what looks like irrefutable position. We divide up the holidays, and you're not particularly religious, and our son is not going to you for Christmas. Well, that sounds like very clear, but what are the feelings and needs there? And why is it that now at 4 years old, you're asking to take your son for Christmas when you haven't been willing to take him all of this time? Now, notice the question is issued as an accusation.
Yeah. Like, aren't you really a hypocrite, is what you're saying.
Suppose we notice that those questions, the most important questions, we miss because we said it as an accusation. So I, as a mediator, can say, wow, you nailed the question. Okay? So can I ask it with curiosity and kindness? Why is it at this time, 4 years into your divorce, you're asking to have your son for Christmas? And the man can say, because he's not a baby anymore. I didn't know what to do with him when he was little. But now he's 4. And I want to start to create some father-son relationships and traditions. And maybe we won't do Christmas tree, but maybe we'll do fishing. Now, all of a sudden, mother hears this in a very different way. And as a matter of fact, mother really treasures the relationship with son and father. She thinks it's important.
So what I think I'm hearing, I had an aha moment.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of times when people ask questions, they're really making a rhetorical question. They don't want to know the answer. They're trying to get their point across in a question. But nonviolent communication is where you're authentically asking a question because you want to understand somebody. What are their feelings? What are their needs? So you're asking questions in order to get useful information rather than to say, oh, well, if you can answer this question, you're going to understand my point of view.
Yeah. And when you do that, when you lean into your questions with kindness and curiosity, what you realize is that you didn't notice you were making a judgment about the other person. And so that rhetorical question actually holds in it the seed for something you most need in order to move forward and resolve the dilemma that you have. But you didn't realize that. It's like, why do you keep barging into my office and disturbing my work? Get the hell out of here. But if I actually stop for a minute and I go, wow, I realize I have no idea why you keep coming in.
Yeah, why do you
here.
keep coming in here? Can't you do your job on your own? Oh, well, that's a
There.
rhetorical question.
So notice is all the same
gotta
thing,
notice.
but if I can, so you start to notice, and then I go, I'm feeling confused because I'm not sure why you come in here, come into the office so often. Is there something you're needing or wanting? Well, now I have the potential for a connecting conversation that allows us then to set up some rules about when it's a good time to come to my office and when it's not, and if I'm available to help or if I'm not, where else you might get help or resources.
So do you find that there are like types of people who are open to nonviolent communication and other people who are not open to it all? Because I know generally the mindset of a lot of people is that it's survival of the fittest. I'll go out there and do my best and fight for what I want, and I get what I want, and it's mine, it's not yours, and it's a jungle out there, and even communication is a competition to see who can get their needs met.
Yes.
And not have to give up so much in order to get it. But then there's other people, I think, who look at the world as like it's the flourishing of the most cooperative. I didn't make up the term. I read it in a book.
Oh, I like that.
That it's that we flourish if we're able to make connections and meet each other's needs and really build communities. So that I think maybe even the survival of the fittest type of person can be a very lonely kind of person. You've got what you want, maybe physically, but then you don't have the connections. You don't have people who really care about you and who are looking out for you. So maybe I've gone afield with the question, because the first question, do you find that there are people who are not open to it and people who maybe are?
So the answer is yes, of course. And also, one of the most poignant things that I read that Marshall wrote, he was teaching nonviolent communication in prison with people who were imprisoned for violent crimes. And after several classes, one of his students came up to him afterwards and said, with a great deal of anger, "Why didn't anybody teach this to me before? Because if they had, I wouldn't have had to kill my best friend."
Wow.
We didn't know how to deal with it. He didn't know how to use words.
Words or deal with everything that comes up for us. So what I've observed about people who are not open to nonviolent communication is, first, I don't try to teach it to them. But I have rarely found a person that doesn't respond to empathy and respect and being heard. And something really strange happens, which is in certain situations, if I can stay with somebody, if I have the energy and the strength and the patience to stay with somebody and continue to hear them and to empathize with what their needs are and to hear their point of view, there's a certain point at which they just go.
Yeah, the image that came to my mind is like a pressure cooker just letting off steam rather than exploding from too much pressure and heat.
Yeah, and once you've been heard, amazingly, most people in my experience are more willing to then hear somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, maybe all that pressure of what you want to be heard is just clogging your ears.
Right.
And once it's out, then you can be, and then you feel maybe also like I've been heard, so now I could do the hearing.
Yeah. And at that
it's
point,
transformational.
It is very transformational, and that has been my experience over and over again. Even people who hate it or think that it's not of interest to them, when you actually practice it and you see it in action, then you might not want to do the work to gain the skills, but you might be very happy to work with somebody who has them.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like good skills for leaders.
Yes, immensely. I mean, I think it's a good skill for any human being on the planet, but certainly for people who would like to help people actualize, help people make decisions, help people move forward, connect and understand. That's what these skills are for.
So
it reminds me of Dale Carnegie. Does that ever get brought up? And do people mention the book and, hey, here's some homework, read this book? Because it seems very similar. I mean, not exactly in a lot of ways, but there's like, if I drew a Venn diagram, there would be some common points.
I think there would be a lot of overlap. I think where it would be different might be the intention for using the skills. So I know early on for many of us, we start learning nonviolent communication for the intention of Dale Carnegie. You know, we want to have people like us. We want to have more influence. We want to.
Sure. Well, that's why we all pick up the book, is because of the title. But then you realize that it's really how to talk to people,
right?
And how to be, you know, how to get people to listen to your point of view, or rather, how to get your point of view across,
right?
Without it sounding like an attack.
Exactly.
Or an argument, because that leads to the person self-defending.
Right.
And so you're not going to get them to listen to your point or acknowledge the point. So there's all those, you know, different ways to make a point, you know, in a nice way, in a non-confrontational way. So I found that very important when I read it when I was young. And a lot of common sense there too. I mean, a lot of what I'm hearing now seems like what would be common sense.
Right.
Dale Carnegie, a lot of it I thought was common sense, but it doesn't. Common sense isn't common. I've found, or at least it's not as common as it ought. It isn't common as it ought to be. Things that you consider to be common sense, or that are common sense to you, aren't common sense to other people.
Well, that, and I think the thing that's different for me in this is it really recognizes that it's a skill. And I mean, it's common sense. We all know that exercise is good, and that if I stretch and develop some flexibility, I like yoga, I'll feel better. And so now I have to touch my toes, and lo and behold, I cannot. They're just out of reach for me. And so many of us say, well, I'm getting old, or I'm stiff, or whatever. The other option is to work with people who understand how the body works and begin to develop flexibility. And that takes time, and it takes practice, and it takes the desire to want to do that. And you know.
So where can you connect with other people who have nonviolent communication skills? Because it sounds like maybe you have better conversations.
Yes, right. Well, they're wonderful conversations. And certainly people can connect with me. I run a practice group in North.
Where do you meet and when?
We meet in North Miami. And we're actually breaking for the summer, but we'll pick up again in September. And can I give my email?
Yeah, you should. I was wondering, how do people find your group?
Okay.
Like where and when?
So they can email me at Stephanie at nowchoosepeace.com, or nowchoosepeace at gmail.com. And I can connect them with both my practice group and other resources in the community that they might be interested in, and online resources. So I'd be happy to do that.
How many people are in your group?
My group is generally, I keep it small, so at most it's 8 to 10 people, so that we have lots of space to talk and hear each other and listen.
Where do you usually meet?
We meet in my home on a Sunday afternoon. Sometimes if I have more people interested, then we meet more often, or we're looking at doing some other days in the fall. And then I see people individually. And I also do nonviolent communication on the phone. So it's not uncommon that somebody in my practice group or somebody that I've worked with privately will call me up and go, do you have 15 minutes or 30 minutes to sort of go over this issue and do some practice and think about the language I want to use or what's going on for me. And
you ever get a call from somebody really famous, like, hey, help me get out of this bind. I need to communicate better.
Doesn't it sound nice? Oh, I wish. But I have.
Yeah, from the government leaders.
Yes,
to
yes.
Hey, how do we talk so that it doesn't seem like we're always in conflict? So it seems like we're all on the same team.
Right. Oh, please call.
Yeah, please.
Yes.
I mean, I think that nonviolent communication maybe should be part of the curriculum. You were a public school teacher.
Yes.
You said, shouldn't kids learn these sort of skills so that we have adults who are out there not berating each other and demeaning each other and knocking each other down? We're all in this one big ship together. We ought to try to cooperate and row in the same direction.
I agree. And there are some people that are doing some really fine work creating curricula for students and for teachers, and I work with teachers to. Is
it part of the curriculum in like some parts of the country?
It is, and more often, as I said, you only need one person to know the skills. So, for example, if you're a teacher and you come and learn the skills, then you could teach it to all your kids. in a very easy, natural way, just the way we teach kids to say please and thank you.
Well, like I've read that they teach, they have student mediation programs in
Right.
schools now. My nephew does that at his junior high school. And are these things that you're connected with and involved in, teaching students to be mediators and nonviolent communicators?
So I am not at this moment. I taught for 43 years and retired about 6.5 years ago, and thought, wouldn't it be fun now that I'm old to see if I could work with adults? And I'm really enjoying that, because more and more adults are the age of my children. So it's a different practice for me right now.
So working with adults sounds like it's more in the framework of transformation, changing your old ways, than working with kids. They're like, hey, don't pick up these bad habits you're being taught from your family and society. It's like,
Well, it's not so much bad habits, because that gets us into right and wrong and good and bad. It's more like, if you'd like, I think it's transformational for kids also. I think it's infinitely valuable, particularly for teenagers. If you want to not fight with your mom, and you want to borrow the car, rather than have a big argument, you might go, hey, Mom, are you worried that I won't be safe? And then help her feel that what you're going to do will be safe, and most likely you'll get the car keys. It's very simple.
super. Well, I'm going to try to keep this conversation going with you so I can learn these skills in order to share them. And we're going to have to wrap it up. That's what the music says to me. And also George's note here.
Oh, okay. Well, thank
first.
you, George. This is a
yeah,
delight.
Thank you, George. Always thank George. He's
You're
set up the
welcome.
space.
Thank you.
He maintains the space for us, gives us a nice, safe space to have these conversations and share with whoever is blessed enough to watch and join us. So, Stephanie King, you want me to give out your phone number, too?
That would be great. Thank you.
786-473-0180. She's a certified family court mediator in Florida and a nonviolent communication teacher. Thanks for teaching me and George today and whoever watched. And the next show, I'm going to have a family law attorney, a friend of mine, Jamie Karras, here on SoFloRadio.com.
From high atop 1926 Hollywood Boulevard, you're listening to SoFloRadio.com.